Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Olivia Swak-Goldman. I'm the Executive Director of the Wildlife Justice Commission, and it's my absolute honor to moderate this panel. Thank you so much for coming to our event. From commitment to action, that the Wildlife Justice Commission, we're all about action. So it's really a delight to be having this discussion with you all here today. We're going to talk about following the money to address crimes that affect the environment. It's hosted by the Wildlife Justice Commission, but also by many, many others, including the governments of Brazil, Canada, Colombia, France, the Netherlands, Philippines, Peru, South Africa, the United Kingdom, and WWF International. So thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know this is a packed week for everybody, rushing from one event to the other. So we really appreciate your taking the time to focus on this important issue and one that's close to all of our hearts, especially those dignitaries, civil society organizations, and those joining online as well as here in the room in Vienna. I'd like to spend a moment just to talk about what our objectives are and make sure we're all focused on what we can achieve in this limited time that we have together. What we're hoping to do is to first explore the role of the illicit financial flows in enabling crimes that affect the environment and identify practical, innovative, and cooperative approaches to address them. Second, we're going to really focus on practitioners' perspectives on key challenges and solutions, while also examining how international cooperation and existing international legal frameworks, including under the UNCOC, and I'll just note in particular UNCOC Resolution 11.9, and UNCOC, can support stronger prevention, investigation, and enforcement responses, as well, of course, as the ongoing discussions on a potential additional UNCOC protocol on crimes that affect the environment. We have an amazing array of speakers, and I'm going to introduce them briefly, starting with Her Excellency Ambassador Marcela Tovar Thomas, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Colombia to the UN in Vienna. We then have Carlos Sanchez de Aguilla, Minister Counselor, Permanent Mission of the Republic of Peru to the UN in Vienna, and the indomitable chair of the open-ended UNCOC Intergovernmental Expert Group on Crimes that Affect the Environment. We have His Excellency Ambassador Marcelo Sousa de la Nina, General Coordinator for Combating Transnational Illicit Activities at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil. We have Advocate Museveni Punya, Deputy Director of Public Prosecution, Regional Head of Organized Crime in Northern Cape, South Africa. We also have Lieutenant Colonel Hervé Marie, Head of the National Analysis, Animation, and Support Center at the Gendarmerie Nationale's Command for Environment and Public Health, under the French Ministry of Interior, will join us online. We have Mr. Oswaldo Cudero, Coordinator of Environmental Crime Analysis and Operations Group of Colombia's Financial Intelligence Unit, in a pre-recorded video intervention. We have Rob Perry-Jones, Head of Wildlife Crime Program at WWF International, and our very own Lisa Hartevelt, Director of Policy of Wildlife Justice Commission. So as I said, a star-studded panel, each with a different perspective, and really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to share on this important topic. For opening remarks, I'd like to give the floor to Her Excellency Ambassador Marcela Tovar Thomas, Permanent Representative of the Republic of Colombia. Please, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, civil society, and friends. Colombia extends its sincere appreciation to Wildlife Justice Commission for convening this important discussion and to such a cross-regional group of partners. The Philippines, France, the United Kingdom, South Africa, Peru, the Netherlands, Brazil, Canada, and WWF on the need to follow the money to effectively address crimes that affect the environment. The conversation could not be more timely. For Colombia, it's clear that the environmental crimes are not isolated or peripheral phenomena. They're dynamic, highly profitable illicit economies that are deeply embedded in the operations of organized criminal networks. Activities such as illegal mining, deforestation, and the trafficking of natural resources are not only causing irreversible environmental damage, but are also generating sophisticated transnational financial flows that sustain and expand criminal structures and, in some cases, finance. These economies do not operate in silos. They are perpetuated by the interconnected with other serious crimes, including, of course, drug trafficking, corruption, trafficking in persons, and money laundering, forming complex criminal ecosystems where different illicit activities reinforce one another. This convergence amplifies their impact, not only on the environment, but also on security, governance, and sustainable development. In this context, Colombia wishes to emphasize a central point. Without a strong focus on illicit financial flows, our response will remain futile. These crimes are sustained by financial circuits that are evolving, sophisticated, and increasingly difficult to detect and disrupt. Following the money is not simply a technical tool, it is a strategic imperative. For complex problems, complex solutions. Yet, the international community has not given the same level of priority to illicit financial flows linked to environmental crime as it has to the other areas such as narco-trafficking. Colombia knows that. This imbalance is no longer sustainable. If we are serious about dismantling organized crime, and fighting narco trafficking, we must equally target all its sources of financing, including those derived from environmental criminal exploitation. Colombia's experience demonstrates that activities, in particular illegal mining, have become highly lucrative mechanisms not only for generating criminal proceeds, but also for laundering them, allowing criminal organizations to diversify their income and strengthen their operational capacity. The challenge we face is therefore structural. The lack of harmonized definitions, the absence of common standards, and gaps in legal frameworks continue to hinder effective international cooperation, including the use of key tools such as mutual legal assistance, extradition, and joint investigations. These gaps are not neutral. They are actively exploited by organized criminal groups. It is precisely in this context that Colombia underscores the urgent need to strengthen the international legal framework. In particular, we reiterate our strong support for advancing the negotiations of one or more additional protocols to the United Nations Conventions against Transnational Organized Crime. Such a protocol would represent a critical step forward. It would facilitate the harmonization of definitions, strengthen international cooperation, and establish common minimum standards for the criminalization, investigation, and prosecution of crimes that affect the environment. Equally importantly, it would help fully integrate a financial dimension into the global response, ensuring that we are not only addressing environmental harm itself, but also dismantling the financial structures that sustain these criminal economies. Colombia firmly believes that combating crimes that affect the environment is not only an environmental priority, it is also a central strategy for weakening organized crime by cutting off its sources of financing. We sincerely hope that today's discussion will contribute to elevating the urgency of this issue and, above all, to advancing a shared understanding that addressing crimes against the environment requires not only strong commitments, but sustained and coordinated action. We trust that this event will help bring forward the importance of moving decisively from commitment to implementation, including through strong financial approaches and the advancement on an international legal framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. We couldn't have said it better, and we congratulate you and Colombia for the key role that you've been playing at the domestic and multilateral levels in addressing crimes that affect the environment and the illicit financial flow. So congratulations, and thank you so much for your leadership. We're delighted to have Colombia's FIU participate later today in this discussion. I just want to point out that your focus on the stronger international legal frameworks and cooperation mechanisms to close the existing legal and enforcement gaps is so important and an opportunity for us here at the UNCOC COP in October of this year. And looking forward to working with Colombia further on this topic. I'd like to turn to our next speaker, Mr. Carlos Sanchez de la Guia, as I mentioned, the Minister, Counselor, Permanent Representative of Peru to the UN in Vienna and a leading force on the IEG. Carlos, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Olivia, for your kind words, and also thank you to Wildlife Justice Commissions and the organizers of this very important and timely side event. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, and representatives from civil society. Crimes that affect the environment are no merely environmental offenses. They have evolved into one of the most profitable manifestations of transnational organized crime, generating enormous illicit financial flows, fueling corruption, undermining governance, distorting legitimate markets, and threatening sustainable development. According to international assessments, environmental crimes generate between $110 to $281 billion annually in illicit proceeds, making them one of the largest criminal economies in the world. Yet, less than 1% of these profits are ultimately recovered by authorities. Criminal networks continue to exploit weak governance, regulatory fragmentation, opaque supply chains, and gaps in international cooperation to move and conceal their profits. The discussion held during the two meetings of the IEG on crimes that affect the environment confirmed a growing international consensus on the close links between crimes that affect the environment, corruption, money laundering, and illicit financial flows. Delegations repeatedly emphasize that these crimes are often perceived as low-risk and high-profit activities, creating powerful incentives for criminal organizations. For Peru, this is not a theoretical concern. My country has witnessed how environmental crime can evolve into a major national security and government challenge. Illegal coal mining has become the largest illicit economy in Peru, surpassing drug trafficking in terms of financial returns. Recent estimates indicate that illegal gold mining generates approximately $7 billion annually, while information from Peru's Financial Intelligence Unit shows that illegal mining accounts for around 60% of all detected illicit assets linked to money laundering investigation, far exceeding other criminal markets. Said so, what we are witnessing is not simply an environmental degradation. We are witnessing the consolidation of sophisticated criminal economies capable of corrupting public institutions, infiltrating legal markets, financing violence, exploiting vulnerable communities, and weakening the rule of law. The expert group discussions also highlighted a number of persistent challenges. Many countries still lack harmonized criminal definitions and sanctions regarding this particular illicit. In numerous jurisdictions, environmental offenses do not meet the threshold of serious crime under the UNCOC, limiting the use of international cooperation mechanisms. Delegations also identify important gaps in financial investigations, asset tracing, beneficial ownership, transparency, traceability systems, and asset recovery frameworks. This brings us to a fundamental reality. Environmental crimes are not committed because criminals seek to destroy forests, pollute rivers, or drive species to extinction. They are committed because they generate extraordinary profits. Therefore, there is no more effective way to combat transnational organized crimes that affect the environment than by targeting its finances. Following the money must become a central pillar of our collective response. We need stronger anti-money laundering frameworks. greater use of financial intelligence, enhanced cooperation among FIUs, more effective asset confiscation and recovery mechanism, a stronger due diligence obligation, and greater transparency across global supply chains. If we understand crimes that affect the environment as a business model, our objective must be to dismantle and make that business model unprofitable. As long as criminal networks continue to generate billions in illicit profits with minimal risk, they will continue to destroy forests, poison rivers, traffic wildlife, and exploit communities. If we're serious about protecting the environment, we must be equally serious about dismantling the financial structures that sustain these criminal enterprises. To conclude, the most effective way to combat transnational organized crime that affect the environment is to follow the money, seize their profits, and remove the economic incentive that make these crimes so attractive. When we deprive criminal networks of their illicit gains, we do more than protect nature. We defend the rule of law itself and the well-being and future of our societies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Carlos. And I just want to commend Peru's role in addressing crimes that affect the environment in the multilateral level. And particularly thank you for your 2 years of leadership as chair of the UNTOC open-ended IEG on crimes that affect the environment for the past 2 years. Just important to note, you highlighted how the IEG process provided a critical platform to address advanced discussions and responses to this topic, to ensure effective prevention and enforcement against crimes that affect the environment. And that states need to address the financial dimensions. And international legal frameworks and cooperations can help to address this gap and strengthen global response to these challenges. So thank you for bringing all those thoughts straight to the top of our agenda today. I'd like to turn to our last speaker for these opening remarks, Advocate Museveni Ponye, Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, Regional Head of Organized Crime in Northern Cape, South Africa. Advocate, the floor is yours.
Chair, distinguished guests and colleagues, thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this important dialogue. The theme of this side event is both timely and essential. Crimes that affect the environment have become a major driver of transnational organized crime, generating significant illicit profit while remaining low in risk and high reward. Despite growing international recognition of the threat, less than 1% of illicit proceeds are recovered, allowing criminals' profit to remain embedded in the global financial system. Whether illegal mining, wildlife trafficking, or illicit waste flow, these crimes are sustained by financial sophisticated criminal networks operating across borders. Enforcement efforts that focuses only on commodities such as seized wildlife products or arrest of low levels of offenders do not dismantle these networks. The key action is simple: follow the money. Financial investigation allows authorities to identify organizers, facilitators, and beneficiaries behind environmental crimes, moving environmental beyond frontline actors to the networks that profit most. Delegates, in South Africa, integrating financial intelligence into enforcement has delivered measurable results, including successful money laundering prosecution and stronger disruption of organized criminal structures through partnerships such as SAMLIT, Illegal Wildlife Trade Task Force, and multi-agents operational collaboration. Through this platform, financial data and typologies are shared in structured manner, enabling the identification of suspicious transaction patterns linked to the wild trafficking. Additionally, Technical Operation Group allows for the effective and efficient investigation of high-priority financial crimes and allow for a real-time interface and collaboration between these stakeholders. One of the most significant results of proactive financial investigation led to the arrest and prosecution of 16 persons, including a third-party money launderer, a field ranger, a low-level government employee, a police officer, and others, which resulted in a decreasing of poaching for at least 6 months. Since 2022, South Africa has successfully prosecuted 19 money laundering cases linked to these crimes, with a sentence of 10 years imprisonment being imposed on these charges alone. These approaches are not theoretical. They are operational effective. However, a national action alone is not enough. Illicit financial flow moves across borders, while international legal cooperation remains fragmented. Stronger global cooperation, improved legal framework, and embedding financial investigation into environmental crimes responses are essential. Current international legal framework are fragmented and do not consistently classify environmental crime as serious organized crime or predicate offenses for money laundering, which limit effective cross-border cooperation under United Nations Convention Against Transnational Organized Crime and United Nations Convention Against Corruption. These legal gaps weakens the global ability to trace, investigate, and disrupt the illicit financial flow that fuel environmental crime. There is a growing recognition that stronger international cooperation is urgently needed, and that an additional protocol under UNTOC may be most effective way to address these shortcomings. Strengthening international criminal justice responses will not only improve enforcement, but also support broader development goals, including peace, justice, strong institutions, and environmental protection. Ultimately, the financial profit behind these crimes is what sustains organized criminal network. So disrupting illicit financial flow is key to change the system. To conclude, it is admittedly the commodity that drives organized crime. It is also not the commodity that drives the organized crime. It is the profit. If we disrupt money, we disrupt the system. I look forward to the discussion and to practical insight that will emerge from this engagement. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate, and congratulations to you and your colleagues in South Africa for really implementing this. In 19 cases, that's fantastic. It's a real leadership, and we're grateful for it. And thank you also for focusing on some of the challenges from a prosecutorial perspective. Again, we can talk a lot here in Vienna and New York and in other locations, but what does that mean on the ground? What are the challenges we're facing in actually trying to enforce these laws and go after the profits, which are what are driving these crimes that affect the environment? So thank you for sharing those with us, noting the need for more harmonization, less fragmentation, the need to work together. It's important for us to keep in mind, and hopefully we'll be able to come up with some practical solutions in the time we have together. Thank you. I'd now like to move to the interactive discussion part. We have about half an hour. The idea is to do two things. First, to have two rounds, one on, let's just make sure we're all clear on what the problem is. And then the second round, focusing on solutions. It's a big task. And obviously the conversation doesn't end today in this room at 2:00, but it's important that we at least try and move it forward and have a really clear idea of where we see the challenges from different perspectives and how we think we can solve that. So the first round, understanding the problem. So identifying key legal, regulatory, and enforcement challenges, and draw on some practical case studies to highlight lessons learned from operational experience. To kick us off, I'd like to turn to Rob Perry-Jones. Rob, what does follow the money mean from a WWF perspective?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm very honoured to sit alongside distinguished panelists. In response to a question, I'd like to reflect upon three perspectives. The first is shifting focus. Following the money is not just about catching the bad guys, it's also about taking us beyond low-level actors and shifting focus towards higher-level enablers and beneficiaries. But in doing so, that also brings us closer often to corruption. And That's an important point to note, that corruption, environmental crime, illicit financial flows, human rights abuses, they don't sit or operate in isolation. They're part of self-reinforcing systems, often linked to instability and conflict. They often have devastating impacts on indigenous peoples and local communities, and often take place in contexts with gendered impacts disproportionately affecting women and young girls. Shifting focus requires taking a systems approach, and central to that equation is working with the global financial system, driving due diligence, and addressing criminal actors downstream and upstream. The second point to reflect upon, I think, is about lost public revenue. We often hear about the value of the criminal economy, but we hear less about what states are losing. And lost public revenue is critical in that conversation. Environmental crimes, they drain resources that could otherwise be allocated to public services. They distort markets, as we've heard today, and they erode trust in institutions, they undermine human rights, and they erode environmental integrity and resilience. The WWF at the moment is developing a simple but robust methodology to quantify what states are losing in this respect versus what they're investing in health, in education, environment protection, and enforcement. The third point, just quickly, is about reframing. And I think, as I already touched upon just earlier, crimes that affect the environment are not niche environmental issues. They undermine state security, human security, and environmental security. They're way more than environment. They're systemic whole of society threats, encompassing climate, rule of law, biodiversity, global financial system, and human rights. And they require a whole of society response. And yesterday, we heard this elaborated upon very clearly in the event convened by WCS, where DEFRA presented their nature, risk, and security assessment that brings all these elements together and clearly articulates that. Madam Chair, those are my 3 points that I'll use to frame. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you for sharing that perspective, and also really excited about the work WWF International is doing on quantifying the lost revenue. I think that'll be extremely useful because it takes it from this sort of amorphous assertion to being really concrete. What does that mean also for local governments, local communities, local authorities, and can help also perhaps build some of the political will that we need in order to be addressing this. So thank you. Thank you for that. Now I'd like to turn to our next speaker joining us online, Lieutenant Colonel Hervé Marie. Lieutenant, from the perspective of the Gendarmerie Nationale and your role as Lieutenant Colonel of its Command on Environmental and Health, could you highlight your experience in addressing the illicit financial flows related to crimes that affect the environment?
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for your presentation, Rob. It's very clear we are facing massive financial flow generated by environmental crime. But as a police officer and financial investigation expert, my priority is to cut the profits of these networks to prevent them from enriching criminal net structures. The real question is, how do we systematize criminal investigation and asset seizures? More and more organized crime groups are entering this field because they know the risk to reward ratio is highly favorable. The penalties are much lower than for drug trafficking, for example. Today, environmental crime is no longer just a regulatory problem. It's a transnational white-collar organized crime. To dismantle it, states must shift from administrative policing to aggressive and disruptive criminal investigations. Follow the money to track assets and fight underlying corruption, of course. However, in practice, this shift faces 3 major legal and regulatory roadblocks. The first roadblock is the predominance of administrative authorities. The special environmental law remains heavily dependent on administrative acts. For instance, companies trading in live animals, importing timber, must obtain formal permits and licenses. However, these official documents can be falsified or obtained through the corruption of public officials. During a checkpoint inspection, law enforcement are decided by this appearance of legality, which prevents establishing a criminal offense. Authorities settle for a simple administrative fine instead of opening a criminal case, which in most countries blocks any subsequent prosecution for money laundering, of course. The second roadblock concerns proving the means area or criminal intent. The greatest difficulty arises when an illicit activity is concealed within a legitimate business, and it's most frequent. Take a company authorized to operate a specific gold mine that also extracts ore from an illegal quarry nearby. During an inspection, proving the exact origin of the mineral is highly complex. The criminal slips through the cracks by claiming the ore comes from the legal site. Furthermore, banks don't detect this flow and don't report these revenues via suspicious activity reports to FIUs, because the accounts look legitimate on papers, of course. Proving specific intent through this missing of licit and illicit flows, what we call commingling, remains a major hurdle for law enforcement and prosecutors. The third roadblock is international asymmetry. Dirty money travels faster than mutual legal assistance treaties or international data sharing. OCGs understand this perfectly. They swiftly transfer funds and set up headquarters in tax havens in our jurisdiction list as non-cooperating by the FATF. They even launder their assets into renewable energy companies to capture green subsidies. Due to the lack of harmonized definition across states, the principle of drug criminality required to prosecute money laundering becomes almost impossible to apply. Moreover, to trigger the powerful tools of the UNTOC, the offense must carry a minimal penalty of 4 years of imprisonment, as long as third-party states continue to punish waste trafficking or illegal logging with mere administrative fines. The Palermo tools such as lifting bank secrecy will remain legally impossible to enforce this in most jurisdictions. Imagine a company duly registered, possessing full legal personality. It collects industrial waste under valid administrative permits, invoices clients in good faith, and purports to export the waste for recovery. Instead, it dumps it illegally. Within months, before filing any tax or financial statements, the directors liquidate the company, strip its assets, and channel the proceeds into offshore accounts. When an environmental inspector discovers a contamination, they face an insolvent shell company, of course. The stakes are left. Profits are laundered abroad through nominees and trust. Traditional administrative remedies prove powerless against these preordained avoidance strategies, which systematically rely on nominee directors. While asset recovery is inherently complex, the statutory presumption of money laundering under the French criminal codes offers an effective countermeasure by reversing the burden of proof. Offense provides a legal basis to freeze and subsequently confiscate any asset disproportionate to the defendant's lawful income. To conclude, the legal framework is shifting to close this loophole. It's necessary raise to penalties up to 10 years of imprisonment, aligning our domestic offenses with UNTOC standards. On a global scale, the battle is now being fought at the United Nations. Following the working group session in Vienna, the UNTOC Conference of the Parties is coming October. Hopefully may adopt a resolution for a fourth additional protocol dedicated specially to environmental crimes. Our objective is clear: to ensure these environmental offenses are universally classified as serious crime. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel, and for highlighting some of the obstacles that you and your team face in addressing the illicit financial flows related to crimes that affect the environment. I think that's extremely useful for us, and we really look forward to hearing in the next round how you and your team managed to resolve some of those obstacles. I'd like now to give the floor to Lisa Harteveld, Director of Policy at the Wildlife Justice Commission. Lisa, drawing on some of the operational experience that you and the colleagues in the Wildlife Justice Commission have, could you share a case study that illustrates how financial investigations can in fact help to dismantle transnational environmental crime networks and the lessons that this offers regarding what works best and what the challenges are? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this question. I would like to illustrate the importance of following the money through a case that demonstrates both the scale of the challenge and the opportunities available to us. So why does this matter? Too often, wildlife trafficking enforcement focuses on, as mentioned before, on seizures and lower level actors. And while this is important, this rarely dismantles the criminal networks that are responsible. To achieve meaningful disruption, we need to identify and target the organizers, the financiers, the facilitators, and the beneficiaries operating behind the scenes. Between 2018 and 2022, one criminal network operating between Africa and Asia acquired more than 17 tons of wildlife products, representing over 40 rhinos, up to 77,000 pangolins, 160 elephants, and 120 lions. The products had an estimated wholesale value of nearly $9 million in Asian markets. This was not opportunistic crime. It was a sophisticated transnational business. So what did we find? Working alongside law enforcement authorities in 2 African countries, the WJC supported a multi-year investigation into this network. The network was highly mobile, operated across multiple jurisdictions, and continued trafficking despite major seizures and financial losses. It relied on brokers, transport facilitators, corrupt actors, international logistics networks, and complex financial arrangements to move products from Africa to Asia. Ultimately, the investigation led to the arrest and successful prosecution of a crime boss, 2 of his lieutenants, and a senior broker in 2022. So how was this achieved? The operation combined intelligence analysis, undercover investigations, surveillance, digital forensics, and financial investigations. Importantly, financial investigations helped identify key actors, understand the structure of the network, and expose how criminal proceeds were generated and moved. The case also demonstrated the value of the tools already available under the UNTOC and the UNCAC. In addition to financial investigations, special investigative techniques, intelligence sharing, international cooperation, and multi-agency collaboration were all critical to reaching the upper levels of the networks rather than stopping at the couriers or the intermediaries. Equally important was the partnership between law enforcement agencies, civil society, and other stakeholders. So, what was the impact? The collapse of this network contributed to measurable disruption across major wildlife trafficking routes between Africa and Asia. Known law enforcement seizures linked to the network represented the financial losses of more than $900,000. When accounting for the value of those products, though, in destination markets, the losses exceeded $1 million. More importantly, the case demonstrated also that it is possible to move beyond seizures and target those individuals who organize, finance, and profit from environmental crime. So the key lesson with this case study is simple. If we want to dismantle environmental crime networks, what do you think? We need to follow the money. Financial investigations, international cooperation, and strong multi-stakeholder partnerships are not optional additions. They are essential tools. And frameworks under both the UNTOC and the UNCAC, if applied to tackling such crimes, can help us do exactly that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I think it's really helpful to have a case study to explain what this means in practice and how it can work and what are the things we need to be focusing on in terms of cooperation, in terms of following the money, multi-stakeholder, all these aspects, and not just in theory, but what that can mean to us as practitioners and as policymakers when we actually apply these rules and regulations. So thank you for sharing that with us. I would like to close out then part one of our discussion and move to part two, which is building an effective and coordinated response to crimes that affect the environment and its economic drivers. The aim of this round is to highlight best practices and innovative approaches addressing the nexus between ISFs and crimes against the environment, and demonstrate how opportunities under the UNTOC and the UNCOC can support stronger international cooperation, intelligence-led investigations, and more effective enforcement responses to that crimes in practice. We will start the second round with a video contribution from Mr. Oswaldo Cudero, who's coordinator of Financial Crime Analysis and Operations Group of Colombia's Financial Intelligence Unit. May I please, I believe Mr. Cudero is going to do a pre-recorded video intervention. So if we can turn to this intervention. Thank you very much.
Habernos invitado a este fabuloso evento. Reciban todos ustedes de parte de nuestro director general, el doctor Wilmar Mejía, un caluroso y cordial saludo. Nos vamos a referir de manera especial a la importancia del fortalecimiento del enfoque de seguir el dinero como una herramienta para la lucha contra los delitos ambientales. La Unidad de Inteligencia Financiera de Colombia fue creada en 1999 bajo la Ley 526 y tiene la misionalidad central de identificar, detectar y prevenir el lavado de activos y la financiación del terrorismo. Posteriormente, la Ley 1621 nos otorga funciones de inteligencia financiera y nos permite identificar los delitos ambientales como un elemento fundamental contra lo cual detectar lavado de activos y financiación del terrorismo. Para hablar de ello debemos centrarnos en unos desafíos que son centrales a la hora de combatir los delitos ambientales a partir de las capacidades de la inteligencia financiera. El primero de ellos es que la mayoría de estos delitos presentan un alto flujo de transaccionalidad en efectivo, por lo cual para la inteligencia financiera resulta ser difícil detectar estos flujos. Lo otro son las debilidades que existen en términos de la calidad de los datos existentes en algunos sectores del desarrollo que son importantes para la detección de los delitos ambientales. Otro elemento clave es la baja interoperabilidad que existe en los sistemas de información en Colombia, debido a que cada una de las fuentes de información tiene intencionalidades misionales diferentes y no tienen capacidad de convergencia entre sí. Otro elemento central son las dificultades para establecer vínculos razonables entre las transacciones financieras como tal y el delito ambiental que se sucede en una ubicación espacial concreta. Otro desafío importante son la baja incidencia de reportes de operaciones sospechosas que tengan como tema central los delitos ambientales. La mayoría de los reportes de operaciones sospechosas provienen del sistema financiero y el sistema financiero no tiene todavía las capacidades y el catálogo de señales de alerta necesarios para identificar los delitos ambientales. En ese orden de ideas surge una pregunta muy interesante, no solamente de cómo ayudar a combatir los delitos ambientales desde la inteligencia financiera, sino ya en términos prácticos, cómo establecer vínculos razonables entre la información financiera y la información de aquellas cadenas de suministro que nos hablan del uso de los recursos naturales y los commodities en Colombia. Una de las preguntas más razonables tiene que ver con cómo utilizar las capacidades de inteligencia financiera para combatir los delitos ambientales. Y en términos más prácticos, preguntarnos cómo establecer vínculos razonables entre la información financiera y la información comercial y ambiental que proviene de los sectores del desarrollo. Es decir, cómo establecer relaciones entre lo que sucede en términos prácticos en delito ambiental en una ubicación espacial concreta con la información financiera que posee la unidad de inteligencia financiera. Para ello, la UIAF ha establecido convenios con diferentes sectores del desarrollo para poder acceder a fuentes de información que otras unidades de inteligencia financiera no poseen. Es así como en el momento poseemos información del sector de minas y energía, poseemos información del sector de hidrocarburos, poseemos información del sector de agricultura y muy especialmente aquella información que proviene de saneamiento animal que nos permite establecer cuáles los flujos de ganado que se transcurren en las diferentes ubicaciones en el país. Para ello hemos desarrollado un modelo de análisis muy importante. Este modelo de análisis inicialmente ayuda a identificar y a dar contexto a las operaciones financieras. En primer lugar, entender y comprender las convergencias que se suceden entre economía lícita y economía ilícita en contextos locales donde se suceden los delitos ambientales. Estas cadenas de suministro utilizan fuentes lícitas y fuentes ilícitas para poder blanquear el dinero. Otra metodología es comprender en términos generales el análisis del flujo de cómo se comportan los bienes, los minerales, los productos agrícolas y aquellos commodities que provienen de los recursos naturales. Entender de dónde se producen y hacia dónde se dirigen. Otro elemento fundamental que aporta la inteligencia financiera son el establecimiento de vínculos financieros y el establecimiento de vínculos comerciales para poder entender realmente las relaciones que se suceden entre los diferentes actores que se encuentran en una estructura que comete delitos ambientales. Finalmente, la detección de señales de alerta y de inconsistencia financiera que nos van a mostrar cuáles son aquellas personas que están financiando los delitos ambientales o que se benefician directamente de ellos. En ese orden de ideas, este modelo de análisis permite obtener unos resultados muy contundentes. Uno de ellos es la identificación de patrones de flujo. Quiere decir que nosotros podemos comprender cómo se comportan los recursos naturales y cómo se comercializan en una unidad espacial concreta, hacia dónde se dirigen, quién los comercia, cómo se comporta la cadena de suministro. En otro orden de ideas, la análisis de datos de las cadenas comerciales nos permiten entender las concentraciones, quiénes manejan y quiénes dominan los flujos de comercialización de estos bienes ambientales. Y finalmente eso nos va a permitir identificar personas naturales y personas jurídicas que realmente se benefician de estos delitos ambientales o financian los delitos ambientales. En términos generales y aportando elementos de discusión para este panel, queremos concluir que esto no es posible sin un proceso de articulación interinstitucional contundente que permita converger la información financiera con información de los sectores primarios como minas, agricultura, ganadería, etc. En Colombia existe un escenario muy importante en el que este diálogo se da, que es el Consejo Nacional de Lucha contra los Delitos Ambientales, CONALDEF. En ese orden de ideas, también es importante el procesamiento masivo de datos, no quedarnos solamente con reportes de operación sospechosa, sino tener la capacidad de acceder a millones de datos que nos permitan identificar patrones y atipicidades que sean congruentes con delitos ambientales. Finalmente, se requiere un conocimiento especializado sobre el comportamiento de las cadenas de suministro. Es decir, es importante entender cómo funcionan cada uno de las cadenas de suministro en términos de quién accede a ellas, quién coloca los recursos y cómo se comportan para sacar a los grandes centros de consumo aquellos recursos naturales que provienen de la deforestación, de la destrucción del bosque y de otros daños ambientales.
Like to just express our appreciation to Colombia for allowing us to learn from Mr. Osvaldo's experience and of the team and being able to hear about some of these really concrete solutions that the team has been able to find to address these structural challenges. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'd like to now turn back to Lieutenant Colonel Hervé Marie, who's joining us online. Lieutenant, based on the challenges you previously described, could you share best practices on tackling illicit financial flows related to crimes that affect the environment in France, as well as at the international level?
Yes, thank you very much. I will not deliver a theoretical lecture of this problem. As a police officer specializing in financial investigation in first, I intend to immerse you in a major transnational investigation dismantled by the gendarmerie, French customs and French tax administration. Finally, this case judged in 2024, this case serves as a textbook example in France. It perfectly illustrates green-collar crime, a white-collar crime where environmental illicit activity has a single objective, maximizing illegal assets through corruption. This network intertwined an OCG involved in procurement fraud, the preemption of land by a local authority under the guise of protecting a rare plant, the downy greenbrier, collision with traditional organized crime, and massive environmental offenses with 1,500,000 tons of toxic waste illegally dumped, all under it through offshore shell company and kickback chains. The public prosecutor reminds us at priori that clientelism had become a method of governance. To disrupt this network, we currently launched environmental, financial, tax, and custom investigation in the same time. Here is our methodology. The core of the fraud lay in the operation of the landfill. To maximize profitability, this OCG illegally imported hazardous waste from the Naples regions, dumped at night under falsified tracking documents, stating the cargo consisted merely of local household waste. The examining magistrate constantly repeated, witnesses may recant, but mindflow have an indelible memory. Inspection of every truck at the border being impossible. We substantiate nighttime dumping through photographic surveillance to establish the facts, making the subsequent analysis of financial flows and accounting paramount. The French FIU saved us invaluable time by analyzing suspicion transaction reports and requesting assistance through the Hangman Group for other countries. TrackFins, the French FIU, and Customs uncovered a system of sham services, channeling profits toward Luxembourg, Switzerland, and trust in Panama. The Article 40 of the Merida Convention records that involving bank secrecy to refuse mutual legal assistance is strictly prohibited. Grounded in this convention and the UNTOC, we prioritized direct intelligence sharing via the Hangman Group, which provide significantly faster than international letters regulatory, some of which remain pending despite Europol or Interpol networks. Legally wide cooperation was excellent with Italy. It remained moderate with other countries, but it's logical at this moment. We are in 2010s. Sorry. To counter this obstacle labeled, our financial agility enabled immediate financial distribution, while before the criminal trial through a devastating threefold strategy. The first, the criminal component. As soon as they were identified, illicit assets were frozen. A total of 13 million euros in criminal proceeds were seized. The customs component. Based on our joint investigations, customs issued a fine of 30 million euros, levied under the general tax on polluting activities. And the tax component. To prevent statutory limitations, the tax authority exercised its right to information to issue a 5,700,000 euros tax reassessment for undeclared activity and VAT, long before the final 2024 ruling. Concurrently, the prefect imposed administrative sanction prohibiting further waste disposal until the site achieved regulatory compliance, specifically requiring soil remediation and the reintroduction of the downy blindweed. France implements a legal framework that allows the accumulation of distinct sanctions for the same conduct in full compliance with the non-bis in idem principle. The decisive blow was the freezing of 4 million euros in outstanding receivables from a major client. Instantly, it's paralyzing logistics and illicit kickbacks. The effectiveness of this task force led to high historic conviction. The court substantiated the material elements of an organized crime, proving a corrupt pact tied to traditional OCGs, integrating political decision makers, administrative executives, and shell companies. The mastermind received 6 years of imprisonment. His brother, the senator, was sentenced to 3 years in prison and a 5-year disqualification from public office. This is the end of his political career. Furthermore, the legal entity which materialized in this OCG was sentenced to a 150,000 euro fine, coupled with a permanent debarment from public procurement. This is a true economic death penalty for this society. In conclusion, French message for our work at the United Nations is clear. When confronting complex environmental crime, establishing material evidence of economical damage can be challenging. However, deploying multi-agency task forces combining environmental, financial, customs, and tax investigations invariably exposes the purely profit-driven motive of this OCG. The follow the money methodology anchored in the anti-money laundering framework of the UNTOC remains the only viable strategy to dismantle eco-mafias. This is the first time we speak about an eco-mafia in the southeast of France for these cases. By leveraging special investigative techniques and spontaneous intelligence sharing to freeze financial flows without bank secrecy barriers. This underscores that absolute necessity for a future protocol supplementing the UNTOC against environmental crime, which will formally grant these enforcement powers globally. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lieutenant Colonel, also for focusing on the practical and not the theoretical aspects and the textbook example. We have only a few more minutes, and we have some very important closing remarks that we want to have enough time for. So what I'd like to do is, Rob and Lisa, can I ask you to go just very, very quickly, and then we can turn to Ambassador for the closing remarks. So Rob, in one word, how does WWF see the private sector fit into the fight against illicit financial flows tied to crimes against the environment?
Thank you. Very quickly, the private sector we see as being critical to in collaboration. We've developed an environmental crimes financial toolkit in collaboration with the banks. They sit at the heart of risk and vulnerabilities, but also are therefore uniquely positioned to be able to respond to detect and disrupt illicit flows. It's an open access digital platform. It's open to anyone. My colleague Michelle from WWF will be presenting, going into more detail tomorrow, so I have a chance to delve more deeply into that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And now, Lisa, in the case you mentioned before, can you name one key opportunity that emerged from that case study? Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yes. The opportunity I would like to highlight concerns cryptocurrency. During the investigation, we found that the criminal network used a range of payment methods, which included cash, bank transfers, but also cryptocurrency to move funds across borders and pay suppliers, brokers, and transport facilitators. The network that we saw that they used was the Tether cryptocurrency, USDT, to transfer funds internationally. This cryptocurrency is reported to be amongst the most popular cryptocurrencies used by organized criminal networks in Asia and Southeast Asia. And basically, most criminal networks view, as it seems, that cryptocurrency is anonymous, it's digital, and it's not really tangible, right? And difficult to trace. But our findings really do see that sometimes the opposite is true. In this case, the actors really appear to have limited technical sophistication, and transactions were conducted in relatively simple ways and often passed through regulated exchanges, really creating a digital trail that could be traced. So I'd like to highlight this is an important opportunity also for law enforcement, but also for the private sector to become involved, and specifically cryptocurrency exchanges and issues which may be able to help identify, freeze, and disrupt wallets linked with criminal activity. Leave it at that. You can
thank you, Lisa.
more in a case study that's on your desk. So if you'd like to learn more, please.
Exactly. And we will come out with a big report on our website in the coming weeks. Now, I think we do have a few more minutes of no use of this room afterwards. So I'd like now to give the word to His Excellency Ambassador Marcelo Sousa Delmina for some closing remarks. Thank you, Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Olivia. And first of all, let me thank the Wildlife Justice Commission for providing me with this opportunity to be here today. It's a pleasure and an honor. Perhaps the very first thing that I have to say today is to ask for your forgiveness if my remarks may sound somewhat simplistic, I'm afraid. It's a bit difficult to make the closing remarks in an event where actually those who spoke before you are better qualified to talk about the matter under discussion than you are. So in any case, I'll try my best. My first finding here today is quite obvious. Our countries and the organizations gathered here today at this event are all committed to the cause of addressing crimes that affect the environment through a follow the money approach. So how do we do it? How do we do it at the multilateral policy level? How do we go from commitment to action, as so adequately suggested in the title of this event? Again, having listened to my predecessors, I tried to devise a simple summary of the challenge we all face and a roadmap to take us from commitment to action. So the environmental crime industry is, of course, operated by organized crime. So this is quite obvious, but I think it's important to keep that in mind and to be conscious of that. So just like in the case of other modalities of transnational crime, financial intelligence and financial cooperation are essential to disrupt criminal networks operating in environmental crimes too. Follows as an obvious consequence. The UNTOC was a landmark in establishing the tools and the legal basis for states parties to apply a follow the money approach to fight transnational organized crime, and that was 25 years ago. So my point is this: an additional protocol on crimes that affect the environment to the UNTOC would trigger the application of the money laundering provisions of the UNTOC, making those conducts predicate offenses, which is a basic necessity for financial investigations and for freezing, seizing, and confiscating assets. So what I take away from this event here today, what I take away from what I heard from more qualified speakers, is that that is what we at the multilateral policy level need to do. That is what we concretely, we diplomats, we negotiators need to do. And that is why Brazil and the coalition, we are proposing that at the next COP of the UNTOC later in October, we adopt a resolution launching negotiations on a new protocol on crimes that affect the environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador, for synthesizing so eloquently everything that's been discussed over this past hour and coming with a really concrete action for the multilateral system. That's extremely helpful. And thank you and Brazil for your leadership on this issue. In closing, I'd like to thank everybody that participated here today. Thank you all for spending your valuable time with us to help think about these issues and come with concrete solutions. Thanks to all the organizations and states that co-hosted with the Wildlife Justice Commission. And I look forward to continuing these discussions leading up to the UNCOC COP in October and beyond. Thank you very much for your attention. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.